Chapter 8, the Jefferson Era. Section 3, the Coming of War. During the late 1700s and early 1800s, overseas trade was a very profitable business. However, with that profit came risk. There were lots of risks due to one of the causes of Barbary pirates. The Barbary pirates lived along the northern coast of Africa, and they would capture merchant ships. So if you look at this map here, this is North Africa right here. So there are 4 Barbary states: Morocco, Algiers, Tunis, and Tripoli. Those are the 4 Barbary states. These pirates from the different states would attack merchant ships. These attacks continued until the U.S. declared war on the Barbary states and sent the USS Constitution, which was our premier battleship, to the coast of Africa. Other warships were also sent. So the Barbary pirates are a problem. But an even bigger problem happened when the British and the French again went to war in 1803, and they wanted to stop, both sides wanted to stop the U.S. from aiding their enemy. They didn't want the French didn't want the British helping, or the Americans helping the British, and the British didn't want the Americans helping the French. The British started stopping American merchant ships in the search for British sailors who would try to leave the British Navy, who ran away from the British Navy. And so they would stop merchant ships and take sailors off the ship and put them back into the British Navy. The problem here was they were taking American citizens, for the most part, and making them serve on British ships. This is called impressment. So the British, and one example of this is the British ship Leopard, stopped the U.S. Navy ship Chesapeake and took sailors by force. Again, the definition of this is called impressment. So I'm going to write this down. Impressment. This must be in your notes. This means that you're forcing a sailor or someone to serve in someone else's navy. Impressment. Now, lots of people debated over what the response of impressment by the British should be. Obviously, you'll have people who want to go to war, but other people didn't want to go to war. Thomas Jefferson and Congress decided to pass a law called the Embargo Act in 1807, which banned trade with all foreign countries. And this was an attempt to punish Britain and France. However, it really hurt the Americans the most by doing this. It devastated American merchants. They lost lots of money. And Britain and France didn't really suffer from it. It mainly hurt Americans. So it was very unpopular. Looking at this political cartoon, it says, "Darn it," probably says "damn it," but we'll say "darn it, how he nicks 'em." And this guy says, "Oh, this cursed oh grab me." Now, I'm going to give you a little quiz. What does "oh grab me" mean? I'll give you 10 seconds. Time's up. "Oh grab me" means embargo. It's spelled backwards. So now Congress will replace the unpopular Embargo Act with something called the Nonintercourse Act in 1809, which only banned trade with Britain, France, and their colonies. So that means the merchants are going to start selling to other countries besides France and Britain. Again, it still hurt American merchants more than it hurt Britain and France. U.S. decided with this Non-Intercourse Act that they would trade with the first country who stopped violating American neutrality. Again, this law was no more successful than the Embargo Act was. Again, this political cartoon shows you, here's the French and the British, and there's poor Thomas Jefferson in the middle being held up because it's saying that the laws were useless. The disagreement between the United States and Great Britain went beyond the neutrality issue. It also had to deal with Native Americans and staying on American territory. yes, there were some British people still on American lands out in the West, especially in this part of the country called the Northwest Territory. And as more Americans are moving into these territories, they're invading Indian lands, and so they're clashing. British agents armed Native Americans with weapons along the western frontier so they could attack American settlers. Tecumseh was an Indian chief of the Shawnee tribe, and he does emerge as a leader, and he was a brilliant speaker, and he had hoped that the Native Americans, especially in that area, would unite together to fight off the settlers. So he went to unite the tribes of the northwestern frontier, the south, and the eastern Mississippi Valley, all in an attempt to resist white settlers. Tecumseh founded a village near a river called the Tippecanoe River and another river that kind of crosses it, the Wabash River, in Indiana Territory. And this village became the Tippecanoe Village. Now, the governor of the Indiana Territory was a guy named William Henry Harrison, who you see right here. He warned Tecumseh not to resist the power of the United States. So you have Tecumseh here, you have William Henry Harrison, and this guy here is Tecumseh's brother, who is known as the Prophet. And these two were not going to listen to him. Now, while Tecumseh was out trying to gather up supporters of this confederation that he wanted to form, William Henry Harrison leads an attack on the village in 1811. And he feared that Tecumseh was becoming too powerful, especially with the help of the British. And so he attacks the Prophet and his group at Tippecanoe. And U.S. forces will win the battle of Tippecanoe, despite the fact that they lost many of their officers in the battle. And Tecumseh, who was not involved in the battle, will flee to Canada. This became known as the Battle of Tippecanoe. Now, due to the mounting evidence that the British were aiding Tecumseh, some young members of Congress from the South and the West, who became nicknamed the Warhawks, were demanding war. They were also mad at the fact that the British had these really horrible trade restrictions, and they also wanted to invade Canada to get more land for the United States. So you have the Warhawks, who are from the South and the West, and you have a group from New England who are Federalists, who were opposed to war with Britain. Of course, Britain is one of their allies, if you will. And even though they didn't like the trade restrictions, and they knew it hurt merchants in the United States, the Federalists were saying that they were not prepared for war, and so they should not go to war. A new president will be elected in 1808. His name is James Madison. He is of the same thinking of Thomas Jefferson. And immediately, as soon as he's sworn in, he is facing all this pressure to go to war with Great Britain. Now, he holds off for a while, but eventually that pressure will catch up with him. But he posed it to Congress. He said Congress needs to vote whether we should go to war or not. Congress voted and declared war for the first time in the nation's history. Madison was re-elected in 1812, and he would serve as the commander-in-chief during the War of 1812. Very, unique name for this war. And that'll be talked about in the next lesson. So that is the end of lesson 3.